So I'm Lyle, 32M, and I guess you could say I'm at the center of a family drama that I didn't ask for but can't seem to avoid. To set the stage, it all started when my parents passed away unexpectedly. It was a rough time, and after everything settled, I inherited the family home. This wasn't out of the blue. My parents made it clear in their will that I would get the house. You see, I had been the one taking care of them during their final years. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Isabella 29F, was off in another city, living her best life. She's always been the golden child, and it seems that being away didn't change her view of the world or how she treats people. Growing up, it was no secret that Isabella was the favorite. She was the one our parents fawned over while I was sort of in the background. I don't mean to sound bitter, but it was what it was. Isabella could do no wrong in their eyes, and even when she made selfish or manipulative moves, they'd always brush it off. I learned to just deal with it. As adults, we weren't super close. Isabella had her glamorous life in another city, working in finance, and I stayed close to home, taking care of things as needed. When our parents died, the will specifically left me the house. It wasn't a surprise to anyone who knew the situation. I had been the one looking after them, handling their medical appointments, making sure they were comfortable. Isabella had visited sporadically, but she was always too busy to stay long. So when the inheritance was read, it was pretty straightforward. Isabella got her share in the form of assets, and I got the house. A few months passed, and that's when Isabella called me. Her lifestyle had apparently caught up with her. Too many expensive nights out and high-end shopping. She needed a place to stay for just a little while, she said, until she got back on her feet. It didn't sit right with me, but I wasn't heartless. She was my sister, after all. I figured it would be temporary, and I reluctantly agreed. That was my first mistake. The moment Isabella moved in, it was like she'd decided the house was hers. She didn't even try to ease into it. She changed the living room decor within a week, swapped out some of my stuff for things she bought online, and even moved some of my belongings into storage without asking. I'd come home from work and find new furniture in the house, all picked out by her like she was running the place. She started having friends over without giving me a heads up, and it was always at inconvenient times. I let it slide at first, thinking she'd move out soon, but it was getting worse every day. What really pushed me over the edge was how she started dropping hints that we should share the house. She acted like the fact that we were siblings meant she was automatically entitled to half, despite what the will clearly stated. She would say things like, it would only be fair if we both had a say in what happens here, and she'd refer to the place as ours instead of mine. The entitlement was unbelievable. Months went by, and her behavior just got more bold. She'd throw these dinner parties for her friends, turning the house into a social hub, and I was just expected to deal with it. No asking permission, no respect for my space. I'd sit down to relax after work, and boom, there'd be 10 people in the living room, laughing and drinking. It was as if I didn't exist. The breaking point came one night when I came home from work, only to find that Isabella had changed the locks. Yes, you read that right. She didn't even bother telling me. When I finally managed to get inside after pounding on the door for what felt like forever, I found her hosting yet another dinner party. She barely looked up when I walked in. It was like I was the intruder in my own home. That's when I knew I had to do something. I confronted her after the party. I was trying to stay calm, but inside I was furious. She acted like it was no big deal, casually telling me that it would be better if I just moved out. According to her, her lifestyle and friends were a better fit for the house. Can you imagine that? I was the one who legally owned the place, and she was suggesting that I leave. The next morning, I called our family lawyer to make sure everything was in order. I had a feeling Isabella was going to escalate things, and I wanted to be prepared. The lawyer assured me that the house was legally mine, and Isabella had no claim to it. He even suggested I consider starting eviction proceedings if things didn't improve. I didn't want it to come to that, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I tried one last time to make things work. I offered Isabella a compromise. Either she could start contributing to household expenses, or she needed to find her own place. She laughed in my face. She actually refused, saying she wasn't about to pay rent for her own house. That's when I gave her an ultimatum: either pay up or get out. She didn't take it well. She stormed out of the house, telling me she was done with me. I thought that might be the end of it, but the next day, I got a letter from her lawyer. She was threatening to take me to court, claiming she was entitled to half the house. I knew she didn't have a case, but I wasn't about to let her bully me. I decided I'd fight back if I had to, and in the meantime, I started quietly gathering evidence of her behavior around the house. That's when karma started coming into play. Update 1. About a week after Isabella stormed out of the house, I got another letter from her lawyer. This one was more intense than the first. They claimed that living together was causing Isabella emotional distress and made the argument that the situation was untenable. The letter was full of demands, the main one being that I needed to move out of the house immediately. The whole thing felt ridiculous, especially since the house was legally mine, but Isabella clearly wasn't going to let this go without a fight. Things escalated fast from there. Isabella 29F wasn't just relying on legal threats. She started reaching out to family members and mutual friends, spinning a completely different story. According to her, I was heartlessly kicking her out on the streets while she was going through financial hardship. She painted me as some sort of villain who was refusing to help his own sister in her time of need. It was frustrating, but I knew she was playing the manipulation game hard. The first call came from our aunt, one of Isabella's biggest supporters. She was angry and demanded to know why I was being so heartless. I explained my side, how Isabella had been living rent-free, acting like she owned the place, and now had the nerve to change the locks on me. But it didn't matter. Isabella had already gotten to her, and in her mind, I was the bad guy. It wasn't just my aunt either. Other relatives were siding with Isabella, saying that family comes first and I should be helping her out, not forcing her to leave. Despite the pressure from family, I held my ground. And surprisingly, a few mutual friends started reaching out to me with a different take. They told me that Isabella had been telling different versions of the story to different people. Some heard that I was kicking her out, others heard that I was emotionally abusive, and a few even thought I had somehow tricked her out of her share of the inheritance. The lies were piling up, and some people were starting to see through them. A couple of friends even offered me support, saying they could see what Isabella was really doing. In the background, I was working with my lawyer to prepare for what felt like an inevitable court battle. I had all the necessary documents lined up, proof of ownership, the will, and records of the renovations and upgrades to the house that I'd paid for myself. My lawyer reassured me that I was in a strong position, but still, it was hard to wrap my head around how far this situation had spiraled out of control. Eventually, my lawyer suggested we go ahead and file for formal eviction. I hadn't wanted it to come to this, but at this point I saw no other option. Isabella wasn't going to leave on her own, and the longer she stayed, the more unbearable things got. So reluctantly, I agreed to start the eviction process. That's when Isabella took things public. She launched a full-blown social media campaign, painting herself as a victim of my cruelty. She posted these long, dramatic updates about how her brother was kicking her out while she was down on her luck, making her seem like the innocent one. The comments section was a mess, filled with people offering sympathy and support. It was infuriating, but I didn't engage. I knew responding would only make things worse, and besides, I had more important things to focus on. At home, things were getting worse by the day. Isabella, clearly feeling the pressure, started blasting loud music at all hours of the night. She left dirty dishes everywhere and intentionally made a mess of the shared spaces. It was like she was trying to provoke me into reacting, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I documented everything. I took pictures, kept a log of her behavior, and made sure I had evidence to present in court if it came to that. Her behavior wasn't limited to just noise and messes. She started inviting more and more people over, turning the house into what felt like a social club. There were nights where I'd come home and find the living room packed with people I didn't know, all of them acting like they had every right to be there. Once again, I documented everything, knowing this could only help my case. Out of nowhere, Isabella made an unexpected offer. She told me that if I gave her a lump sum of cash, she would leave for good. She claimed she was tired of the drama and just wanted what she felt she deserved. The audacity was unbelievable. I wasn't about to give in, especially knowing that this was likely just another one of her manipulative ploys. I told her the money was off the table and that I was prepared to see this through legally. Shortly after that, we received a court date for the eviction hearing. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that things were finally moving forward, but dread because I knew Isabella wasn't going to go down without a fight. That's when her behavior took a weird turn. She suddenly became sweet, almost disturbingly so. She started cleaning up around the house, doing the dishes, and even made me dinner one night. It was like she had done a complete 180, but I wasn't buying it. I knew she was up to something. Sure enough, a friend of mine who worked in finance confirmed my suspicions. Isabella's financial situation was even worse than I thought. She was on the verge of bankruptcy and needed the house to keep up appearances. She was playing nice because she thought it might buy her more time. I didn't let on that I knew. I kept quiet, played along, and waited for the court date. It felt like karma was starting to catch up with Isabella, but I had a feeling this was only the beginning of her downfall. Update 2. As the eviction hearing approached, Isabella didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down on her social media persona. Every other day, she posted long, dramatic updates about her homeless future, painting herself as the victim and me as the cold, heartless brother throwing her out into the streets. It was the same story she'd been feeding to our family and mutual friends, but now it was reaching a much wider audience. People in the comments were eating it up, offering her places to stay, and even suggesting they'd help her financially. The sympathy was rolling in. Meanwhile, I kept quiet. My lawyer had advised me to stay out of any public drama, and I wasn't about to make things worse by getting into arguments on social media. But it wasn't easy. I could feel the weight of judgment from people who only knew Isabella's side. Some of our acquaintances were starting to look at me differently, clearly believing her version of events. Still, I kept my head down and focused on preparing for the upcoming court hearing. Out of nowhere, I got a message from Troy, an old childhood friend. Troy used to date Isabella years ago, and while we hadn't spoken in a long time, his message took me by surprise. He told me he'd been following the situation from a distance and wanted to give me a heads up. Apparently, Isabella had pulled similar manipulative stunts when they were together. Troy warned me that she was likely to play dirty in court and offered to testify on my behalf if things got messy. I didn't expect that, but it was a relief to know someone else saw through her act. In the meantime, I kept gathering evidence. Every loud party, every piece of damaged furniture, every time she refused to contribute to the bills or upkeep, I documented it all. My lawyer assured me that this would help solidify my case in court. I didn't want to leave any room for doubt, especially with the way Isabella was playing the victim card so publicly. Through some digging, I uncovered more about Isabella's financial situation. It was worse than I thought. She'd maxed out multiple credit cards, was months behind on rent at her old apartment, and had only moved in with me because she was about to be evicted. She never mentioned any of this to me, of course. She just showed up asking for temporary help, pretending she had it all together. Learning this only made me more determined to see things through legally. As the court date got closer, my lawyer walked me through everything. We had all the documents, the will, proof of ownership, records of the money I'd spent on the house. My nerves started to settle a bit, knowing how solid my case was. But just when I thought things were moving smoothly, Isabella tried one more trick. A few days before the hearing, she approached me, suddenly acting like she wanted to make amends. She claimed she'd been stressed and was ready to settle things privately. She dangled the idea of moving out voluntarily if I'd just give her a few $1,000s to help her land on her feet. It was almost laughable at that point. I calmly told her no, that we'd let the court handle it. She didn't take it well. She stormed off, fuming, and warned me that things were going to get a lot worse. True to her word, she ramped up her smear campaign. More family members were calling me, asking why I was being so cruel. Isabella even went as far as telling people that I'd kicked her out when we were kids, which was a complete fabrication. No one had ever heard that story before, but apparently she was willing to rewrite our history to make herself look more sympathetic. One afternoon, I ran into Mara, one of Isabella's close friends, at a cafe. I braced myself for an awkward conversation, expecting more of the same accusations, but Mara surprised me. She admitted that she didn't believe Isabella's version of events. She said a lot of their friends were starting to see through the lies but didn't want to confront her directly. Mara didn't go into too much detail, but it was clear that Isabella's social circle was beginning to unravel. It was small, but it gave me a little hope that people were starting to see the truth. With all the information I'd gathered, I walked into court feeling more prepared than ever. My lawyer had one last ace up his sleeve, Isabella's bankruptcy filings, which I had found through public records. I wasn't sure if she knew I had that information, but I planned to use it if necessary. The day of the hearing arrived, and Isabella showed up with her lawyer, looking smug and confident. She kept glancing at her phone, clearly updating her friends on the proceedings. I stayed quiet and let my lawyer handle things. The judge went through the paperwork quickly, and it didn't take long for the decision to come down in my favor. The will, the ownership documents, and all the evidence I'd gathered left no room for doubt. The judge granted the eviction request, giving Isabella 30 days to move out. Isabella was stunned. After the ruling, she had a full-blown meltdown right outside the courtroom. She screamed at me, accusing me of ruining her life and saying I'd always been jealous of her. She swore that karma would come for me. I stood there and listened, but I didn't engage. There was nothing left to say. Even though the judge had ruled in my favor, I knew Isabella wasn't going to go quietly. I could sense her desperation. She had 30 days to vacate, but something told me she wasn't going to go down without pulling one last stunt. I had to stay alert. There was still time for her to try something drastic, and I wasn't about to let my guard down. Update 3. With just 2 weeks left before Isabella was legally required to move out, something strange happened. She suddenly dropped all the aggressive behavior. Instead of fighting with me like she usually did, she became almost eerily polite. She started cleaning the house, making dinners, and acting like nothing was wrong. She even went out of her way to be overly friendly, which was a huge red flag. I'd been dealing with Isabella long enough to know that this sudden shift wasn't genuine. She was up to something. My suspicions were confirmed a few days later. I was straightening up the living room when I noticed something odd near one of the bookshelves. At first, I thought it was just another of her random knickknacks, but then I realized it was a hidden camera. It was angled to capture pretty much everything that happened in the living room, especially interactions between us. That's when it clicked. She was trying to bait me into doing or saying something she could use against me in court, probably to delay her eviction or get some kind of leverage. I took the camera down immediately and contacted my lawyer. We documented the discovery, took photos, and made sure the camera was completely disabled. It was another layer to the mess, but at least we had proof of her underhanded tactics. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Around the same time, I started hearing from people in Isabella's social circle. Her friend Mara, who had already hinted that people were catching on to Isabella's lies, told me that several of their mutual friends had stopped hanging out with her altogether. Apparently, the cracks in her perfect image were starting to show. Her whole social media campaign against me had backfired after the court ruling. People were seeing through her victim act, especially when they realized she hadn't been as honest about the situation as she pretended to be. It wasn't just her friends that were turning away from her. Isabella's financial life was crumbling fast. I found out she had been dodging calls from creditors for weeks, and her car was about to be repossessed. She was sinking, but still hadn't admitted it to anyone. The facade of her successful life was falling apart, but instead of facing reality, she was doubling down on her toxic behavior. Then, just days before she was supposed to leave, things escalated. I came home one afternoon to find that Isabella had completely trashed the house. There was broken furniture scattered across the living room, graffiti sprayed on the walls, and torn-up photos of our parents littered all over the floor. It was clearly an act of revenge, her last-ditch effort to lash out because she knew the end was near. I immediately started documenting the damage. I took pictures of everything, videos too, and sent them over to my lawyer. We agreed that if she didn't pay for the damages, we would press charges. At this point, I had no sympathy left. She'd pushed every boundary and made it clear she wasn't going to leave without causing as much destruction as possible. I confronted her the next day. I gave her a final warning, telling her she needed to leave peacefully and pay for what she had destroyed. She just laughed in my face. Her exact words were something along the lines of, "There's nothing you can do to me that's worse than what life has already done." She was right about one thing, her life was falling apart, and I couldn't do much to make it worse. But I wasn't about to let her drag me down with her. On the day of the eviction, I had a crew ready to change the locks as soon as she was out. Isabella packed up what little she had left and stormed out without saying a word. She didn't try to cause a scene, which surprised me, but I wasn't going to question it. The moment she was gone, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The house was finally mine again. I changed the locks, cleaned up the mess she had left behind, and tried to start moving on. But of course it wasn't over yet. Just when I thought I was free of her, I got a letter from a debt collection agency. Isabella had listed me as a co-signer on a massive personal loan she had defaulted on. It was infuriating. I never co-signed anything for her, and I had no idea how she'd managed to pull that off. I immediately contacted my lawyer again, and we got to work proving that I had no connection to the loan. It was just another desperate attempt by Isabella to drag me down with her financial collapse. As word spread about her situation, more of her friends came forward with their own stories. Apparently, she had been manipulating and using people for money for years. Her social circle was crumbling, and it left her more isolated than ever. Her once glamorous lifestyle was completely falling apart. The final blow came not long after. I got word that Isabella's car had been repossessed, and she had filed for bankruptcy. She'd moved into a small, run-down apartment far away from the life of luxury she'd once flaunted. It was a sad ending for someone who had always prided herself on being better than everyone else. Karma had finally caught up with her. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The house was quiet, and I no longer had to worry about Isabella showing up with some new scheme or trying to ruin my life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't quite the end of the story. Isabella had a way of coming back when you least expected it, and I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. Update 4. After the eviction and court battles, I decided it was time to fully cut ties with Isabella. I had no desire to keep her in my life any longer, and after everything that had happened, it was clear that there was no saving our relationship. I went no contact with her immediately. I blocked her on all social media platforms and refused to respond to any texts or calls she tried to send my way. For the first time in a long while, my life was quiet. With Isabella out of the picture, I began focusing on repairing both the house and my life. The damage she had left behind was more than just physical. The emotional toll of the past year had been heavy, but I was determined to move forward. I spent the next few months fixing up the place, repainting walls, replacing broken furniture, and generally putting things back in order. The quiet of the house was a welcome change, but every so often I would catch myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting her to come storming back into my life with some new scheme. Despite the peace in my own home, there was still fallout within the family. Some family members, particularly those who had always favored Isabella, refused to believe the extent of her manipulation. They couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that she wasn't the victim she portrayed herself to be. This left me feeling isolated from parts of my extended family, especially those who continued to side with her despite everything. I tried not to let it bother me, but it was hard not to feel hurt by their loyalty to her, even after the court rulings and her outrageous behavior. Just when I thought I was finally done with her, a letter showed up in my mailbox. It was from Isabella. I didn't want to open it at first, but curiosity got the better of me. In the letter, she apologized for everything that had happened. She claimed she had hit rock bottom and wanted to make amends, asking if we could start fresh. It sounded sincere on the surface, but after everything I'd been through with her, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another one of her manipulations. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I shared the letter with my lawyer. He advised caution and suggested I take my time before making any decisions. I wasn't sure what her true motives were, and after all that had happened, I wasn't in a rush to find out. The wounds were still too fresh, and I wasn't about to let her back into my life without a good reason. While I was dealing with that, something unexpected happened. I had reconnected with an old friend, Rowan, during all the drama with Isabella. Rowan had been a steady source of support throughout the whole ordeal, and over time, our friendship turned into something more. We started dating, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something positive to look forward to. Rowan helped me find my footing again, and our relationship gave me a sense of stability that I hadn't realized I needed. Through this process, I realized how much I had grown from the experience with Isabella. I wasn't the same passive brother who let her walk all over me. I had found my voice, set boundaries, and was prepared to protect what was rightfully mine. It wasn't easy, but I came out of the situation stronger, and that was something I never expected. Meanwhile, Isabella's life was continuing to spiral downward. I heard through the grapevine that she had lost her job. Her erratic behavior at work had finally caught up to her, and without a steady income, she was struggling to keep a roof over her head. While part of me felt a twinge of pity for her, there was also a sense of satisfaction. Karma had finally caught up with her. She had spent so long manipulating and using people, and now she was paying the price. As for me, I continued to repair my relationships with the family members who had supported me through the whole ordeal. I no longer felt the need to defend myself or explain my actions. Those who had stood by me knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. I had survived the storm and come out stronger on the other side. The house felt like mine again, and more importantly, my life did too. But just when I thought everything was finally settling down, one last legal hurdle appeared. Out of nowhere, Isabella tried to contest the will again. This time, she claimed that she had been coerced into signing certain documents, suggesting that our parents had forced her hand. It was a ridiculous accusation, but it meant more time spent dealing with legal issues. My lawyer and I swiftly shut her claims down. We had all the necessary paperwork and proof that her accusations were baseless. It was a last-ditch effort to stir up trouble, but it didn't go anywhere. This was the final straw for Isabella's crumbling case. She had no leg to stand on, and after this, I hoped she would finally let things go. With that final legal battle behind me, I felt a sense of closure. Isabella's attempts to drag me down had failed, and I was ready to move on for good. It had been a long, exhausting process, but I had come out of it stronger and more resilient than ever before. Isabella was out of my life, and this time, I hoped it was for good. Date 5. A few months after all the legal battles ended, something strange happened. Isabella disappeared. I didn't hear from her at all, which was a welcome change, but she also vanished from social media. She had always been so active, constantly updating her followers on her glamorous life. But now, nothing. Even our family noticed that she had cut off most of them. Word eventually trickled back to me that she had moved to a small town somewhere to start over, as one of our cousins put it. I didn't dig any deeper. As far as I was concerned, the less I knew about her whereabouts, the better. For the first time in a long time, I finally felt at peace. With Isabella out of the picture, I didn't have to worry about her showing up at my door or pulling another stunt. The house was mine, and so was my life. I shifted my focus to my career and my relationship with Rowan, who had been by my side through everything. It felt good to have something stable, someone who wasn't constantly bringing drama into my life. I was rebuilding, and for once, things were calm. The house, though, no matter how many repairs I made, it still felt weighed down by all the memories of what had happened. Every room had a reminder of the chaos Isabella had caused. Rowan, seeing how much the house was tied to all the bad memories, suggested something I hadn't considered before. Maybe it was time to sell the family home and start fresh somewhere new. At first, the idea felt a bit extreme. This was the house I grew up in, the house my parents had left me. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The past was heavy, and I was ready to leave it behind. Just as I was beginning to seriously consider selling the house, I got an unexpected call. It was a debt collector, again. I couldn't believe it. This time, it was for a loan Isabella had taken out years ago, long before any of this mess started. Somehow, my name had ended up tied to it. I didn't waste any time. I forwarded the details to my lawyer, and within a few days, he had shut it down before it could escalate. It was a quick fix, but it was a stark reminder that even though Isabella had disappeared, her messes could still reach me. A few months later, Isabella made what I hoped would be her final attempt at contact. I received one last message from her. She claimed that she had changed and wanted to make things right. She said she wanted to come back, to rebuild our relationship, to start fresh. Maybe the old me would have considered it, or at least entertained the idea. But after everything I'd been through, I was fully detached from the toxic cycle. I didn't respond. I had no intention of letting her back into my life, no matter how much she claimed to have changed. With that, I made my final decision. I was going to sell the house. The memories tied to it were just too tainted, and I was ready for a complete fresh start. Rowan was incredibly supportive, encouraging me to leave the past behind and move forward. Together, we started searching for a new home, somewhere we could truly build something of our own. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. The house had been my family's legacy, but it had also been the site of so much pain. It was time to close that chapter for good. When the house was finally sold, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. Isabella had reaped what she had sown, and now I was free to live my life without her shadow looming over me. No more legal battles, no more manipulations, no more drama. The house was no longer my responsibility, and with that, I could fully move forward with my life. As I closed the door on my old life and prepared to embrace my new one, I took a moment to reflect on the entire ordeal. Sometimes, the people closest to us can become the greatest sources of chaos, and that had certainly been the case with Isabella. But through all the turmoil, I had grown stronger. I had found my voice, learned to stand up for myself, and most importantly, I had learned how to protect my peace. The experience had changed me, but in the end, it had made me a better version of myself. In my final post, I let Reddit know that I had officially moved into a new home with Rowan and was starting a new chapter of my life. I made it clear that I was free from Isabella's toxic influence, and I wasn't looking back. Karma had done its job. She had faced the consequences of her actions, and I was finally free to live the life I deserved. It's funny how things come full circle. What started as a family inheritance had spiraled into one of the most challenging years of my life. But now, standing in my new home with Rowan, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The drama, the chaos, it was all behind me. And for the first time, I was truly ready to move forward, free from the past.